We start tonight with breaking news. NBC's reporting the U.S. military struck 2 more targets inside Syria today, continuing last night's dramatic bombing campaign against ISIS and other terrorist groups. Tomorrow, President Obama will address the world at the United Nations with a call to arms against ISIS and other terrorists in Syria. The strikes overnight marked the beginning of a long campaign against key terrorist targets, with support from 5 Arab allies. Late today, at the UN, the president dropped by a meeting with leaders from those countries.
We also recognize that right now we have a very severe and significant threat. What we've seen from the world community is a recognition of that threat, and we are very appreciative of our partnership with all the countries here.
Earlier in the day, this president saying the coalition will do whatever is necessary.
The strength of this coalition makes it clear to the world that this is not America's fight alone. Above all, the people and governments of the Middle East are rejecting ISIL and standing up for the peace and security that the people of the region and the world deserve. The overall effort will take time. There will be challenges ahead, but we're going to do what's necessary to take the fight to this terrorist group for the security of the country and the region and for the entire world.
The Pentagon says the strikes damaged or destroyed targets in and around at least 4 cities, including Raqqa, the headquarters of ISIS. Almost 50 Tomahawk missiles were launched as part of the attacks. Targets included an ISIS finance center and an ISIS communications center. The Pentagon saying today this is only the beginning.
Last night's strikes are the beginning of a credible and sustainable, persistent campaign to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
I can tell you that last night's strikes were only the beginning.
The airstrikes also targeted a terror group that many Americans are only just hearing about, Khorasan. It's a network of al-Qaeda veterans led by a former associate of Osama bin Laden. American officials say the group may have been planning an attack here in the U.S.
The intelligence reports indicated that the Khorasan group was in the final stages of plans to execute major attacks against Western targets and potentially the U.S. homeland.
Right now, it's just after 1 in the morning in Syria, and the terrorists there have good reason to fear what may be coming down again from the skies above. We start with Kristen Welker, live at the White House. Kristen, tell us what they're saying about these strikes. Are they satisfied with it?
Well, Rev, the administration thinks that these first round of airstrikes were significant. They did significant damage. But as you pointed out, the administration is also being quite clear. This is just the beginning. I think the most important part about these first round of airstrikes in Syria from the perspective of administration officials is that the U.S. was joined by those 5 Arab nations. You have heard President Obama talk about for weeks now the importance of going into this with a coalition. The fact that he had 5 Arab nations on board, of course, countries in the region, is significant. It allows him to harness momentum to build a broader coalition as he prepares to do that this week at the UN General Assembly. Of course, he's in New York right now. Tomorrow he will be speaking before the UN. He'll also chair a meeting to discuss the threat of terrorists with a number of other countries at the UN General Assembly. So this is going to allow him to more firmly make his case that going after ISIS is something that requires a broader coalition. You also heard the president say today, Rev, that more than 40 countries had made assurances that they were going to help in the fight against ISIS. The question becomes, what specifically are they going to do to help in the fight? And of course, a key part of it is going to be ground forces. President Obama saying that those troops should come from countries in the region, in the Middle East. And at this point, it doesn't seem as though they have gotten firm commitments. So that is going to be one of the key goals of this president this week when he is at the UN in New York. Now, you talked about the fact that the U.S. also launched airstrikes against Khorasan last night. The U.S. saying that there was an imminent threat from that group. That's going to be a big topic of conversation as well, Rev, how to deal with these terrorist groups and also the foreign fighters who are going overseas to fight with them. Back to you.
Lot to watch for in his speech tomorrow at the UN. Kristen Welker, thanks for your reporting tonight.
Thank you.
Now let's bring in Nicholas Burns, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, now a professor at Harvard University, and MSNBC military analyst, Colonel Jack Jacobs. Thank you both for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Ambassador Burns, what's your reaction to how these airstrikes have gone so far?
I think the president has made the decision he had to make. If we're going to fight ISIS, and as the president said, destroy ISIS, we have to strike at ISIS at its base of support, where the group originated, that's Syria. So it made sense to me that the president would want to conduct airstrikes both in Iraq and Syria. But I think your correspondent is right to say that there has to be a ground element. It won't be the United States. And so it has to come from the Iraqi army, from the Peshmerga forces in Kurdistan, and from some of the moderate Syrian rebel groups. That's a very tall order to organize that in an effective way, and that's the challenge ahead for the United States.
Colonel, what is your reaction to the airstrikes so far?
Well, they hit the bad guys where they are. If you take a look at the map, you'll see the preponderance of the strikes have been around Raqqa, which is the actual headquarters of ISIS. And they predominate over here in the north and the east of Syria. This shows a few other strikes, but there have been lots and lots of them all around the northeastern part of Syria. If you take a look at how we did it, you'll be able to see that we've got the USS Philippine Sea here. We've got the USS Arleigh Burke. Both of these are heavy guided missile cruisers firing Tomahawk missiles. And here you have the George H.W. Bush, which launches FA-18s, and all of them in a coordinated way were striking up at Syria. Very interesting, however, we have air bases in the region. We have one big one in Aviano, Italy, from which we could launch ground-based aircraft. More importantly, take a look at this. We've got an air base in Incirlik, Turkey, very, very close to the target area. Interesting. The Turks won't let us use it. It's kind of reminiscent of when we started to go into Iraq. They wouldn't let us bring the 4th Infantry Division through Turkey to open up a second front into Iraq.
So the Turks will not let us use that air base?
They will not, which is one of the reasons why we have to rely on the seaborne cruise missiles. It would be really useful if we could do this.
What is the range on those Tomahawks? Because it seems pretty far, Colonel.
Yeah, they can go more than 1,000 miles, and they have about 1,000 pounds of explosive in them. They're terminally guided. They hit their target within 1 meter every time.
Let me go back to the previous map with Raqqa. Show me how those Tomahawks would travel. Show me exactly what the trajectory would be.
Yeah, they would go from here. They launched them. I think everybody's seen them all in the videos.
Right.
They launch them from the deck of the ship. They have lots and lots of slots in there. They can carry as many as, well, more than 100 of them. And they would follow a terrain-guided path. It's very interesting. They go very fast, 550 knots, right on the deck. You can't pick them up by radar. They're below radar. There's no way to knock them out, and they unerringly wind up exactly where you punch them in.
Ambassador, let me go back to you. This morning, the president emphasized the importance of the coalition. Listen to this.
I also made clear that America would act as part of a broad coalition, and that's exactly what we've done. We were joined in this action by our friends and partners: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, and Qatar. America is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with these nations on behalf of our common security. More broadly, over 40 nations have offered to help. in this comprehensive effort to confront this terrorist threat.
What is your sense, Ambassador, of the coalition at this point, and what are the challenges the president faced in building it?
Well, Reverend Sharpton, it was impressive that the president was able to mobilize those Arab countries, because at the heart of this struggle is really a struggle for the future of the Sunni Arab world. ISIS represents one option, which is an evil option, a brutal option. Those Sunni Arab states need to stand up to ISIS. They need to engage in further combat with us. They need to act on the ground to try to contain ISIS, and they need to dry up ISIS's financial support. So it's very important that the Sunni Arab countries were involved. I would say it would be very helpful if some of the NATO allies could do more. Very disappointing that the United Kingdom, our strongest ally, has not been with us. Disappointing that France has had such a limited role, a couple of airstrikes a few days ago. Very disappointing that Turkey, our NATO ally, will not allow the use, as you just heard, of the Incirlik air base. Now, Turkey had the excuse. It had 46 hostages held by ISIS, but they were released 3 days ago. No more excuses. And so it's odd and ironic that we'd see some Arab countries provide greater support for the United States than some of our NATO allies. That, of course, has to change. It's not the president's fault. It just means that those NATO countries have to step up and be with us. I suspect that they'd be more comfortable operating in Iraq than they are in Syria. That might be part of the problem.
Now, Colonel, today some military leaders suggested that ISIS will adopt in response to airstrikes. Listen to this.
They are a learning organization, and they will adapt to what we've done and seek to address their shortfalls and gaps against our air campaign in the coming weeks.
How will ISIS adapt? I mean, and would it make the airstrikes less effective because they're able to adapt so well?
The short answer to that question is yes. They've already started adapting. It's interesting to note that ISIS is very much different than al-Qaeda, which was fragmented even from the very beginning. You had organizations operating on them by themselves and so on. ISIS is a hierarchical organization, just like any military organization. They've already headed for the hills outside of Raqqa, gone into the caves, moved their ammunition to places where they're less likely to be struck, moved their trucks around. They're not sitting in truck parks anymore. Over time, it's going to be more and more difficult to find ISIS targets. But unless we want to just do it once and go away, we're going to have to adapt as well, and I think we'll be able to.
Ambassador, let me ask you this quickly. What remains your concerns in the bigger picture? What are the questions that you still have and want answered as we go forward?
I think the president's doing the right thing. I think it's impressive how he's been able to mobilize the Arabs. The key question will be, is there an effective ground component here? Because airstrikes alone may slow down ISIS, contain them for a time, but won't defeat them. So can we mobilize Syrian moderate rebel groups, the Peshmerga, the Iraqis? That's a very, very tough order. It'll take a long time to do. I think that's the key factor right now for the administration.
All right, Ambassador Nicholas Burns and Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you both for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.